All right. Hello, Ayana. How are you?
I'm good. How are you today, Ariane?
I'm doing well, doing well. Thank you
Good.
so much for taking this time, investing your time, taking these few moments to talk to me about your experience as it relates to and teaching your own kids
Right.
during this pandemic, during the coronavirus, COVID-19. We are nearing the end of the school year, but I think
Yes.
perspective is so unique and so uh, and will add value to those that are watching, and especially as we go into trying to figure out what's going to happen for next year. So
Mhm.
I wanted to just sit down with you for just a few moments to discuss uh, this process and what it has
Okay.
meant to you. So just
Okay.
given a little bit of background, tell us what you do specifically and what area of the world you're in.
Okay. Well, I teach eighth grade science. I'm a middle school science teacher in Houma, Louisiana.
Yeah. All right. So middle school science, eighth grade, and that's where you were when all of this started happening, the pandemic,
Yes,
2 months ago now. Are you all still in school?
we are. We're currently in school. We're wrapping up. We're moving toward the end of our school year. Yes, but we are actively still in class sessions.
All right. So still in class sessions. Can you tell us a little bit about what that looks like for you, for your school? What does that being in school right now look like for you?
Well, for us, it is creating online assignments. We use the G Suites, so Google Classroom, Google Meet. We're using that platform in order to still to send out lessons on a weekly basis. Those lessons are depending on the teacher and their content and their style. Some people are releasing daily. Some of us release every other day. But our goal is to still maintain a sense of active academic engagement with our students so that there's no slip, so that there's no falling behind.
Okay.
We do what we can on our end to make sure that the content that they would have received face to face, that they're still receiving that at least to some extent on a virtual level.
Okay.
That could include virtual lab, like for me as a science teacher,
Yeah.
for me that's virtual labs, virtual field trips, videos concerning the content that we're doing. My students have we use Flipgrid in order to create presentations, um, different academic websites and technologies that we've just been able to engage in at this
Okay.
level,
Okay.
that is different from being inside the classroom.
How many students would you normally see a day?
I have 119 students enrolled in my classes.
Okay, 119 enrolled. And what was, if you could give us an idea of the percentage of students who were present and active prior to the pandemic, what percentage would that be?
Um, Prior to the pandemic, I would say I had a pretty good engagement, and I think it's just being science because it's hands-on, because they have an opportunity to connect not just book work, quote unquote, but
Yeah.
they also have that opportunity to be kinesthetic, to incorporate movement and incorporate activity into what we're doing. I had a pretty high engagement, I would say between about 70 and 80%, which honestly is relatively high. If you're looking at a class of 24, and I can say that, 18 to 20 are engaged.
Okay.
I think we're doing pretty well at the middle school level.
Yeah.
Um, so, in classroom, in person, I would say about 80%
About
engagement.
80% engaged. And can you
Yes.
tell, well, let's talk a little bit about post-pandemic. What is that engagement
Okay.
like now? And then we'll dig a little bit deeper.
So for me personally,
Okay.
out of 119 students that I teach, I only have um, about 40% of those that actually enrolled in my online class,
Mm-hmm.
and of the 19, I only have 10% that are actively participating in class.
Of the 19, you said 19, or did you mean to say 119?
119, excuse me.
All right.
Of the
So, oh no, that's
119,
all right. So
I
out of the
have only
119,
10%. Yes,
wow. Wow.
10%.
That is abysmal.
Isn't that astounding?
That is wow. Wow. So let's talk about that, because that is staggering to think that
It is.
119 kids that are enrolled, and over the past 2 months,
Yes.
only 10% of those kids, so about 20 kids, a little
Uh,
over, yeah,
it's less than that.
less than 20.
It's
About,
less. So I
wow,
have maybe 12 kids
about
that are
12 kids.
actively engaged on a weekly basis over 8 weeks.
My
Um,
goodness.
who have been actively engaged in my class, and I can only speak for my class.
All right.
Um, but even in
Why?
terms of me speaking to other teachers,
Okay.
speaking to even other parents,
Mm-hmm.
um, I don't think that my numbers are very far off in
Yeah,
terms of others that are experiencing the same thing.
the same thing. Why?
Yes. Um,
If you had to tell us, give us your idea as to what you think is the issue.
well, I think one of the major issues, especially for the population of students that I teach,
Okay.
um, it was made very clear through our district that these learning opportunities were voluntary, that it would not be graded, that there would not be anything attached to it. And while we would hope that students are intrinsically motivated to learn, um, we have to be realistic in that a middle schooler would much rather play video games and watch TV and be
And
on
sleep.
TikTok all day
Yes.
than to be
Yes.
engaged in class if they had a choice. That's not saying all kids, but we're saying the majority. And so I
Absolutely.
think by making um, this time optional, and it was done, and I understand I'm not placing any blame on anyone.
Yeah.
The way in which this happened was so abrupt and so unprecedented that there
Mhm.
were no plans in place for something like this. So we went in very much understanding that we had to figure this out as we go.
Mhm.
And so there were certain subgroups that were um, unfortunately disenfranchised by this entire situation. So
Mhm.
that was students that didn't own personal devices, because we're not a one-to-one school district. Those are families that didn't have reliable internet access.
Yes.
Those were students that may have to go between households, where maybe because mom or dad or both work, they have to be with grandma at this time, or they may be one parent this time and another parent another time. We have to think about our special ed students, who their needs are very different. And so how are we meeting those needs? How are we meeting the needs of our ELL, English language learner students? So I understand that all of that had to be taken into account. And because of that, we couldn't make it mandatory, not at this point.
Mm.
At the same time, that created this, what I believe is such a low engagement level across the board.
So is there a way, and you said that it was made known. So was this sent out by memo from the main office, from central office? Was it just hearsay kind of passed on through teachers and classrooms, or was this some sort of official announcement to tell parents, hey, if you can, you can, if you can't, you can? How did that come about?
So when we first began, um, we left school March 13th, like many. And then over the next 2 weeks, there was kind of a break and people were figuring things out. And once we realized that we would be at home longer, that was past our spring break time. And so our district actually began developing online lessons and placing them on our district website. And so as they made those lessons available online, part of the information that was given on those pages was that this These assignments are not mandatory. They will not be collected, and they will not be graded.
My goodness.
So it was
My
in
goodness.
writing via our
The website.
district website.
Wow.
And
Wow.
so that being the case, that same directive was passed down once teachers took over those online lessons. That the lessons, while they should remain engaging, they should remain content specific, they should remain enriching in terms of your content. We cannot make the assignments mandatory, and they will
Wow.
not have a grade attached to them.
Wow. What is that 10%, those 12 or so kids that are showing?
Yeah.
Who are they? Why are they the ones showing up? Who are those kids that are showing up?
Though the kids that I have, because you'd be amazed, it's not all of my honors kids. It's not.
Okay.
Those are the kids that when we were physically in class, those were the ones that led in terms of being our those that wanted to answer questions, and those that wanted to be involved, and those that wanted to dig deeper. Those same kids from the classroom are the same ones that I'm seeing are actively engaged in this distance learning process. So when I look at that, it goes back to a sense of not necessarily intrinsic motivation, but there is a sense of this is something that I need and something that I'm going to grow from, and something that I can get something from. Because there are even a couple of students on there that have been engaged and have said, I don't necessarily want to do it, but I know I don't want my grades to slip. I know I don't want to go into next year falling behind. Wow. And I can appreciate that, because they've attached a value to it that's personal for them.
Yes, absolutely. How do you stay motivated as an educator, and also as an educator who is who's still putting all of your effort into making sure that the kids that you serve are getting quality instruction, but who's also dealing with an environment where your colleagues, as well as you, are not getting the kind of participation that makes you feel like you're doing what you should be doing. That makes you feel like I'm appreciated, my efforts are appreciated, and that these kids can prove the world wrong with this demographic. That we don't have to have an ABC, we don't have to have an honor roll to make sure that we're preparing for what is next, because next school year will come regardless, and we'll talk about that.
It will.
How do you remain motivated to do this as an educator?
It's funny that you would ask that, because I had a conversation with a colleague of mine, and this colleague had a very different perspective than I did. This colleague was very offended by the lack of participation, offended that they had taken time to develop lessons, and that kids just weren't doing it. And which I understood. I completely understood. And then, like, I was showing them some of the things that I was doing, and their comment was, "Oh, you are so extra," because I am going above and beyond. But I think for me, the reason I do that is because I am so grateful for the opportunity to be creative in my delivery, to be creative in what I can bring my students. In terms of curriculum, our district is very structured in certain content areas. And what I mean by that is that there are certain programs that our district has purchased and that we're expected to follow to a T. And so that rigidity creates it often stifles the creativity that you have as a teacher, because you know that my curriculum calendar says I have to be on this day, and if I haven't
Yes.
met it by then my instructional coach is going to have a conversation with me and ask
Yeah.
me what's going on, why am I falling behind? And it's not necessarily that I'm falling behind, but I can see that there are things that my kids need at this point that a written curriculum can't see. That's the value of a teacher. And so I think the reason what keeps me motivated through all of this is because this has given me the opportunity to do just that.
To teach.
It's given me the opportunity to teach. It's given me the opportunity to go and find those resources. And I'm learning new things as a teacher. I'm learning new technologies, and I'm digging into new avenues in terms of delivery. You know, there are websites and there are resources that I've come across that I never had an opportunity to use in class per se, in a face-to-face way. But now, because during this time I'm learning and I'm growing, those are things that, okay, I'm gonna find a way to use them when I get back face-to-face with my
Yeah.
kids that I wouldn't have had an opportunity otherwise. So while I know it's frustrating for a lot of people, the you know, I think it's, in a way, it can be more work. It actually can. But at
Mhm.
the same time, for me, it's so valuable because I can see how it's going to change me as an educator,
Yeah.
even once I do get back into a face-to-face situation with my students.
Yeah. And then, and not to mention the beauty of teaching those that are eager to learn.
Yes.
Because
Yes.
you've essentially it's boiled down to just those that they are here for no other reason but
Exactly.
that they love learning. And if it is science, and maybe they're not showing up for their English lessons like they're showing up for science, maybe this is their passion. But as a teacher, I'm sure that there is something rewarding about having interaction with those kids who truly love the concepts that you're covering and the skills that you're helping them to develop. So so that in and of itself, I'm sure, is rewarding. Um,
It most definitely is. I every week I do at least one live session with my students where I'm on and I'm physically teaching and I'm answering questions. And it's funny because I have some students that'll log on and they'll mute their mic and they'll shut off their video, but they're there.
yes,
And so even if they never ask a question, even if they don't interact with me at all, they're there.
they're there.
And
They're
they're there
showing up.
by choice. Nobody forced them. Nobody said, you better be here at such and such time. No, they were like, hey, it's time for our Google Meet
Yeah,
class.
I think
I'm
I'll
going to
log
check in,
on. Yes.
you know?
What
And whether they found it interesting or not, they come
yes.
back every week. And so,
Yes.
yes, it's things like that it warms my heart because, yeah, I don't have 119 students logged in. I don't even have, half of
19
that logged
students.
in. I don't even have 19 students logged in. But the handful that do come,
Yeah.
it lets me know that something I'm doing, something I'm saying, something I'm giving, something I'm showing, it means something to them.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
And that's a
if
big
it
deal.
means something to them, it means something to me.
That's a big deal. What do you anticipate? And I know we're coming to the end of our conversation, and I definitely want to talk about your experience homeschooling your two kind of and a half, because one of them is college. So I'm
Right.
not having to do a whole lot. But I do want to ask you this final question as it relates to you being an educator. What do you believe is going to be, and I know a lot of things are still fluid, still up in the air, as what next year, at least next semester, the fall is going to look like. What do you anticipate is going to be the biggest challenge as we move into the fall 2020?
I think the biggest challenge for all of us will be developing a new normal. Like,
Okay.
what does that look like? In terms of classroom education? Does that mean that we are splitting our days, in terms of to create some social distance in terms of our classroom? Does it mean that we're incorporating more of this distance learning? And if we are, how are we ensuring that students have the technology that they need in order to be successful. Um, perhaps that means that we're going to have to be flexible enough that if this happens again, we are willing to put forth the effort to make it as engaging and as meaningful for our students as possible. I don't know what that's going to look like, but I
Yeah.
do know that having gone through this so abruptly the first time, there's less trepidation in
Yeah.
terms of where we're moving forward.
Yeah.
I feel a sense of, okay, we can do this. Like, we made it through this little bump, and now, because we've seen what it is, and we also know that this isn't necessarily the pinnacle of what we want it to be, how can we make it even better,
Yeah.
than
Absolutely.
what we are now?
Absolutely. Let's switch gears just a little bit and talk about your second and fourth graders.
Yes.
Yes. Two boys, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, what
Yep.
has your experience been like? And we'll talk a little bit about your daughter, who just,
Yeah,
this was her first year in college, right? All right.
it was.
So,
It
talk about the
was.
little ones. What has that experience been like to not only be an educator who is focused on making sure other people's kids get what they need, and I'm sure it still includes, as you mentioned, planning and execution and searching for resources, and
Mm-hmm.
but still at the same time having to homeschool your second grader and fourth grader. Tell us about that experience.
Um, well, for me, I have loved every moment of it. It hasn't always been easy, but I've
Uh-huh.
loved every moment because I got to teach my own kids. Because I had an opportunity to see where they were, to see what they needed, to see where I could push them further, to see where maybe I needed to slow down, maybe I need to enrich, maybe I need to review. Um, when you're a parent doing that just with homework after school, it's a very
Mhm.
different experience. But when you're a parent doing it from a perspective of, this is material that you are learning, this is what you're doing. I'll give you an example of the enrichment process. So my youngest, who's in second grade, one of the subjects that was given to him was in science, pollination. Last week he had to study pollination. Well, it started off with a story on honeybees, and he got completely fascinated and and listened to the read aloud maybe like 6 or 7 times in a row. And so he just wanted to learn about honeybees. Well, that was a great learning opportunity because he finished with everything the teacher had assigned. Now, here we go. Now we can dig deeper. So now I went online and I looked for some resources, and we did a model of um, pollination where we built a flower, and in one flower we created the stigma of the flower with a little sticky tab, and sprinkled some cinnamon in one and some ground ginger in another, and our little pipe cleaner bees went from one to another so we could see how pollination happened. But it happened because he saw something that like caught his attention, and then we could go further with it.
Yeah.
Now, at the same time, there are some things that I noticed in my kids that I need to go in and help them a little more than if
Okay.
it was just a worksheet for homework. Things like their multiplication. My fourth grader, he's a GT math kid, but multiplication, because they don't teach it like they taught us, um,
Absolutely.
is it's taking him a little longer.
Hmm.
So the thing I know I need to do with him is, come on, let's get these multiplication tables. Let's find ways that, it becomes easier for you. So as a homeschooling parent, um, I found it so eye-opening in that it gives me another perspective on my kids.
Yeah.
It gives me the opportunity to see where they are, see where their interests lie, see where even those interests can move into other areas. And I've enjoyed it. I really honestly have.
Yeah. What kinds of support has your college freshman needed, if any? Has she needed any support?
She has, and that's
Okay.
interesting, because when they're on campus, she and I have a wonderful relationship. So even when she was on campus, I would talk to her every day, every other day. When she had questions about things, she would ask me. But being at home, Um, she's an art major, so there've been several art related things that she's had to do. So I've even worked with her on that. You know, mommy, I have to build a chair out of recycled, materials. What do I need to help me do this?
Yeah.
Or working on a paper. Mom, can you proofread this paper for me? What do you think? Am I along the right, along the right train of thought? And um, for me as a parent, that's been heartwarming to know that even though she's moving farther and farther into adulthood, she
Yeah.
still finds value in what I think, what I have to say, in my thought process, in my opinion. And even though it may not change what she does, she's still open to it.
Absolutely.
So, and even, on as a college student, her dilemma also has to do with this limitless amount of time and nothing to do in it, you know?
Yeah.
So even she and we've talked about her mental health, throughout this whole thing. The fact that she's isolated from her friends, the
Yeah.
fact that she's not going, as much as she normally would, and how she interacts with people, how's her sleep schedule going. Those are things that my, college student, she needs my support in.
Yeah.
Whereas,
Absolutely.
my younger kids, they need my support academically far more.
Yeah.
But with her, it's very much about connecting and um, and encouraging her in terms of her mental health through this process.
That's self-care, taking care of
Yes,
yourself.
definitely.
Yeah. If you, and this is my last question for you. So
Okay.
thank you once again for taking time away from the boys, away from your freshman, your girl, and,
Yeah.
away from your job to maybe this is lunch break. Let's call this a lunch break.
Okay.
But thank you so much for doing that. And my final question is a request.
Okay.
If you could give some sort of guidance to those that are listening, those that are watching this video, if you could give some sort of guidance as we begin to go into the summer months and which precedes the fall, what to those, whether educators or moms and dads who are homeschooling, what advice could you give them for the summer?
I think the one piece of advice that I would give is the same advice that I would give if we were face to face and ending the school year, is that yes, summertime is a break, but don't let it also be a break from learning. And I'm not saying learning in terms of a formal kind of format or a schedule, but allow there to be moments throughout this summer where learning is encouraged and learning is a part of what you're doing. If you're going to take a road trip, maybe you and your family are taking a road trip as a vacation, use that as an opportunity to talk about distances. And it doesn't have to be a lesson per se,
Yeah.
but engage them so that it's not a matter of as if learning only happens at school.
Yes.
Let's make learning a part of our children's lives. That's how lifelong learners are made. It's not made because a teacher made them do something. It's made because it's become a part of their everyday lives. And I'm not talking about spending money, and you don't have to be a perfect planner or doing a whole lot of research. But if you're in the kitchen cooking, bring them in.
Bring them
Hey,
in.
you measure out the flour, you measure out how much milk we need, bring them into that. If you're
Yeah.
doing something, some home improvements, hey, we're hanging up a new picture in
Yeah.
the house. Well, how long is that picture and how tall is that picture? Bring those opportunities in where learning doesn't feel like school. It just feels like what they do.
It feels like a part of life.
Yes.
Thank you, Ayana. I appreciate
Thank you
you.
for having me. I appreciate you.